And so in reading today about different Zoom things, it had said something along the lines of, if there's a weird, so you've recorded, and if there's a weird little gap, we've all experienced this, where there's like the bzzz, and then the rest of the sentence comes through, and finally you can hear what the person said because they were laggy. I read that gets smoothened over automatically. So hopefully that happens. Otherwise, what I can do is just take this file, process it properly, which is a pain in the ass, and then edit it the way I would a normal solo video. But we'll see how it goes, man. Hopefully it clears up. So I'm going to guess that
worst case scenario, I'm always happy to do it again anyways.
Yeah, fair enough, man. And I'm hoping to get to a point, as convenient as this is, and I do enjoy this, as convenient as this is, I am hoping to get to a point eventually and soon where people can come over, because it's actually a really cozy room in here. And it face to face, there's a whole different energy, right? I mean, you and I know each other very well, but in face to face would be superior by every estimation.
Right. Yo, I think like the next step would be, your network bandwidth is low. It's probably my fault then. But I think ideally we could if we could get like a booth in the corner of like a pub or something with like a really good like directional mic, and then do that. I think that would be authentic. That would be us.
Man, could you imagine? Okay, you've already got me going, and we're like 5 minutes in. Could you imagine? It starts as like a novelty act, and it's like a place of last resort. We can't record, our internet's garbage. We need to be face to face, and I need a real beer stat. And then we get this booth, and then it just the pub just loves us, and then the publicity builds. So there's like this one dedicated booth where these two, it's just all, so every other booth is like your typical booth with a menu and salt and pepper shakers and vinegar or whatever. And then there's one with like lights and proper microphones. Everyone's like, oh, that's the booth. And then everyone looks to see if we're chatting. I'd love that so much, man. It'd be so funny.
All right, what we got to do, save up. We'll buy a pub and just make it happen.
Or, okay, at that point, can't we just run a bit? Like, can't we just own the pub and run it? We have to do this podcast thing.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, okay, in town here, there is a pub with a hotel on top for sale for just under $3 million. So, save your pennies.
I'll get right on it. Yeah.
And then we'll get the pub. We'll wait for the current pub's lease to run out, or we'll just be like, we're taking this booth. It's ours. And
squatters rights exactly. in the like, no one else is here, no one's claimed this.
Close this booth and we'll drop your rent by 5%.
So we go all out. We become property developers. We become real estate moguls just to sustain one podcast.
That's the dream.
And we have 400 subscribers. They're dedicated, but it's 400 people worldwide.
We know them all personally.
Yeah, for sure, absolutely. Like, dude, who do you think's been viewing these? This isn't, it's like I'm number 58,000 on YouTube trending. But it's fun. It's
58,000 is better than like 7 billion.
True. It's actually extraordinary.
You were the 58th. You were the 58,000th person, most popular person, or most interesting person, or any string of related adjectives that has access to internet. That is statistically, you're doing great already, and all you've had to do is start.
Fair enough. Well, because if you think about it, let's get this right. 70 million is 1% of the world. So if I'm 58,000, even just out of 70 million, I'm known worldwide.
That's more than 2 Canadas, or about 2 Canadas.
Yes.
Every single person in this country, and twice.
Dude, this is why, and I'm glad I'm crossing my fingers that the internet connection stays stable. Okay, this is non-alcoholic beer, I swear. It stays stable, is because this is exactly the kind of energy you and I have, and that this is how we're able to just go for 8.5 hours. Like, You've heard me say this, and you heard me say this back in May and June. I still can't wrap my head around that afternoon. We're like, okay, we'll pop into one. We'll pop
Dude,
in for one.
I laughed so hard when you mentioned it to Cote, and like um I've been churning my brain. I didn't want to Google it because you can easily Google which pub that was, but I've been trying to get it, and I got it. I was thinking the pump, but that's in Mississauga. Mississauga. No, it's the turf. It's
Right.
the turf and tavern. But I was also confusing it with the checker, which is like around the corner.
Okay, that one, the checker was amazing too because that was, I think, not the, it wasn't the last night we were there, but maybe it was the
It was
second to
like,
last.
and I had a big ass bag of change.
Yeah, just it was whatever coins remained after a month. You're like,
Yeah.
let's go out on the
I mean,
town.
that's how I paid for drinks, and like I started buying people drinks because I didn't want to have to carry it home. So I was like, all right, yo, here, count out what you need and lighten my pocket. Thank you.
Yeah, that was a great night. You know what I loved about that night specifically, at the end, or I guess it was like the second to last day, was at that point we were all very close and we all knew each other very well and we were all comfortable. And I think about this all the time. It was the first and probably only time in my entire life so far, where I was able to, you, all of us, you could go from room to room because if you remember, the checker has the little courtyard, and then there's the upstairs terrace, and then the inside there's the actual bar seating area.
Yeah.
We had Yeah, sorry, cut out a little bit, but we had so many people that you couldn't walk 5 feet without bumping into Andrew or Daniela or whomever, and it was really cool. It almost felt like for that evening we kind of owned the place and it was our
Yeah.
spot, and there are a lot of photos there from that
Yeah.
evening.
That was a really one a good. I feel like if like corners, like that pub's
Oh
so
man,
cool because it's like multiple buildings and like three alleyways, and then like two balconies.
it was cool. I mean, you cut out, but I was there, so I know I can guess what you said. Um, Yeah, man. No, it was a really cool spot, and you're right. It did have all these little offshooting places. That's what I think was so cool about it was, and when I say it, I mean England, I mean Oxford. There's this, and I experience this a lot when I go to Europe and especially Greece. The city seems to have unfolded, and maybe I'm totally ignorant because I don't know enough about England, but I can speak, in the case of Greece, that the city unfolds in a very organic manner.
Mm,
So, yeah, so driveways and sidewalks and pedestrian pathways, they all, ironically, they originate organically, but they're all very purposeful, right? So,
mm,
um, likewise, or rather by contrast, when you're here, it's just, and there are pros and cons to everything, but when you're here, it's just rectangles, just parallel streets
yeah.
and parallel streets, and so that can be kind of maddening. Though I imagine the opposite could be too, right? All these spiraling roads and dead end way. Like I could see how that might be claustrophobic, but I choose the word
I
cozy.
imagine that people who are from places like that probably come here. Your hair peaks up. Maybe that's it.
Yeah. I hit record. This will be a funny place to start.
There we
I,
go.
I so I'm sorry, man. I don't know what happened. My computer just I think it might just be that it was trying to do way too much at the same time. Let's just tilt that. It's not the most sophisticated laptop in the world. It gets me, it gets me through the day, but
Right.
I think I had it plugged in. I've got the webcam plugged in, the microphone plugged in. I feel like it might have just been trying to do too much, so I've unplugged the battery at the very least. Let that just kind of happen. Um,
Right.
Maybe closing Chrome, like everything that can help. I'm gonna just try to do. But
Closing Chrome, that's a good idea. I'm gonna do that too,
yeah,
just for my internet's sake.
it just churns and just devours the bandwidth. It's weird. You'll sit there and you'll be like, okay, well, nothing's happening. Why is my computer slow? And then Chrome will be like, thank you for your firstborn child. Um, Truly, man. So it looks like the file is saved. So I think we're in good shape.
All right. Oh, respect.
Um, nice hat though, man.
Thanks, man. You too. Where'd you get it? Some guy beside a river.
Some guy beside a river. I think it was, I want to say 5 pounds, but if you turned
Something
around
like
and
that. That
told me,
feels
what's that?
right. That feels right or sounds right. But
Yeah. You're you're still a little choppy, but I don't care because we're gonna have many more recorded chats like this. So, and I'm by no means a pro. Let's get that straightened out.
yeah, you know what? If it's choppy, it's completely your fault and your unprofessionalism.
I think I think it's my lack of preparedness is being picked up by the router. So I'm clearly emitting signals of my own that are not being interrupted, and then the router is telling me to go screw myself.
Yeah, maybe next time we do this, I'll make plans. I'll go to my grandmother's who lives like 20 minutes away. She has better internet, so then I'll like hers is actually hardwired.
Great, I can picture that. She's delighted to see you. You're like, out of the way, Grandma. I've got an interview. What
Yeah,
brings you around?
yeah, yeah. Basically, yo, move, Nana, get out of here.
No.
Yeah,
She opens the door. You're already past her.
yeah.
I don't even know where we left off, man. I think we were still talking about Oxford. We can still chat about it
We were
more if
talking.
you
We
want.
were talking about like the organicness of town. What I was saying when you froze up was that like I feel like for us to go to somewhere like Europe
Hmm.
um, and go there and see the way that things have like just sort of organically developed, and it's like what you were saying. I imagine that when people from there come here, they're like, "Oh wow, look! It looks like they like thought about this for at least 45 seconds before they built it." So I don't know. Like maybe it's just a different. Like we think of it as charming because we're not used to it.
Yeah, and then of course there's always the possibility that they don't consider it at all, right? I think that, and again, I don't want to stereotype and generalize, and my experience with Europe is limited. Um, but just based on anecdotal evidence, my guess would be that they don't. I mean, it. Let me put it this way: exactly, our thinking might be symptomatic of a sort of thinking that just doesn't exist over there, which is, and I get, hear me out, is a kind of thinking geared towards functionality and productivity and rigor and a regimented kind of, everything must have everything must scream forth its evident purpose or else be, kind of cast aside. Whereas, you'll see things. I know, again, I return to Greece because that's the only thing I really know to any great degree. But you'll see things, and not only are not only would it seem to be the case that certain things that are functional and just part of the fabric of reality go unquestioned, but so too do things that we would regard as useful or as an eyesore or whatever. So I'll give you an example. My grandmother's apartment building in Sparta, across the street, there's this big, it's like a cube. It's this cubic 2-story home, but it has enormously tall ceilings. I've never been inside because it's abandoned. But my guess would be that it's only 2 stories, but each ceiling must be at least 11 or 12 feet tall. It's an extremely tall. It might even be more, because
Wow.
that building, it just happens to be in a place on the edge of town where the mayor lived, and then that wasn't the mayor's house traditionally, but it was another government official. And this is a small town. But nevertheless, that building has fallen into disrepair. And, very few people have lived in there probably for decades. It's covered in graffiti. It's on my Instagram. If you go through my Instagram and kind of scroll back, I'll send you the pic later today or later tonight, whatever. But the idea behind it is it would be more expensive and more of a pain in the ass to tear it down than to just leave it there.
Mm,
If it
right.
was if it was like if it was truly a problem, like kids are going in and falling down and hurting themselves, then maybe. But there isn't this readiness that we have in Toronto, let's say, to assess everything and report on everything. I'm sure people over there have said, okay, well, this building is this is, this building's got to go and da 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 da. But clearly they have other priorities. I've been privy and present during conversations where people have petitioned government officials to do stuff, and you get the kind of, from our perspective, charming romantic refusal, like, we'll get to it, and then 40 years go by and there's the building still standing.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. And it's pretty interesting too, like just in the, I imagine that it, isn't the first time in a place like that that a building has gone unlived in, and then eventually somebody showed up and was like, this is gonna be my house. I'm gonna fix that up, and it's gonna be my house. And any old building there, I'm sure there's been periods of time where some of them were uninhabited or whatever, and then somebody came in, fixed it up, and made it like they just showed up and were like, oh, that's a usable building. All right, cool. I don't need to build 4 walls. I might need to fix a couple floors, but at least the walls are done.
Truly, man. And it really is a gorgeous building, at least from the, from the what I can see from outside. But I remember looking up online because I was curious to do exactly what you just said, which was, what would it cost if I truly wanted to, buy this thing and refurbish it? I think
Mm-hmm.
the asking price, and this was in euros, obviously. I think the asking price, because it is for sale, it's not so maybe abandoned is the wrong word. Clearly, somebody owns it, right?
Mm.
But or maybe the city does, or who knows. But the point is, I think the asking price was about 75,000 euros, which is hilarious because that's quite a bit for Sparta, which is a tiny, tiny town. It's only 30,000 people. Well, tiny town when that's your fourth largest municipality or whatever it is. I'm exaggerating, but
Yeah.
um, so anyhow, I mean, for 75,000 euros is probably, I don't know, two and a half, maybe 150 Canadian, maybe a little more. And that's
Mm.
expensive for an abandoned kind of broken down little house, but to repair it would probably be another 50,000 euros. But the point is, you could buy this end thing and make it stunning and the talk of all the town
Yeah.
for 120,000 euros, whatever that happens to be in Canadian. So, oh, it would be an absolute dream. I've often fantasized about buying the building and then surprising my grandmother one day, because again, she lives across the street, and just being like, "Hey, look," and just, "Hey, look outside," and then in I go or something. You'd love just the sight of it. It really is inspiring, and it's just a cube, like it's just a cubic bunker.
Yeah.
But why bother? Greece has enough problems. They don't need to be worried about tearing down buildings that aren't in use, right?
True. Yeah. That's fair.
So,
Interesting.
man, what's new from the scouting thing? I know that you said that you're busy this
Mhm.
weekend, and that's why I'm so apologetic, because I know
Oh,
that you're very busy.
right. Well, so this weekend is mostly just house stuff. Like, um, this house has always has a lot of work to do. Like, and it's just my mom and I. So like, we've got like still got boxes and stuff that we have to go through. So that's what I've been doing most of today. I woke up way later than I wanted to, but
Mm.
last night going to bed early was beaten out by finishing Sons of Anarchy. So I decided to finish that, and then went to bed, slept in. I didn't set an alarm, and I just woke up at 1. So it's like, okay, well, that's set the tone for today. Okay, then. Sidebarred a lot of the other projects I wanted to do, but okay. Um, and then I just kind of spent the day like I've always had a lot of clothes, so and I have a smaller closet now, because it's like an old school closet. It's just like a little square. So when we were moving, it was such a quick process that I didn't really have time to actually evaluate the clothes that I have. It
Mm.
was it was faster to just get them in a box and get them out than actually take the time to like be like, okay, do I want this blue shirt or this blue shirt? And then
Yeah, yeah.
decide there. So I just put both blue shirts in a box and got them the hell out. Um, so that was like today, and I still have a little bit more work to do because like as soon as you start opening boxes, everything else gets the hallway's a mess now. My room's in great shape, but the hallway's a mess. So because it's like, oh, these are summer clothes that now that it's October, it's
Right.
just too cold for. Like I have a lightweight zip up sweater that's great if you're sitting outside and just want to put a layer on, but in the winter it's a waste of closet space. So stuff like that. It's leaves are falling, and we have huge maple trees, that are easily a couple hundred years old. So like there's a lot of leaves.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
so that's going to be a thing. I was going to try to mow the grass, but it's too wet. So like there's just a lot of like little projects that we have to do, and like we're still, you know, like arguing over, not arguing, but like debating over, okay, should this drawer be the utensils or should it be like the oven mitts, or you know, like stupid shit like that that ultimately affect your experience of the room. But you know, we've changed it around so many times that it, you know, it really just becomes a process. Um, but the scouting thing, it's pretty good. It's a little bit weird because of COVID, and it's a little bit weird because I don't live like in the area of my group anymore. So I have like I'm really only able to participate sort of in the online stuff that they do, but now they're able to start kind of doing some outdoor things like going for like a bike hike or a hike or whatever. So you know, following all the specific rules and everything that go along with that, but I can't participate in those because if I do, it's like a 2 hour drive.
Mm-hmm.
And I frankly have too many things to do here with work and with the house and things that I'm kind of planning for the future um, to really devote to it. But aside from that, it's going pretty good. But I also am involved in like our to like in layman's terms, basically, there's like the region that surrounds Mississauga, and that's like considered a what they call a council. And I'm a voting representative for the whole council that represents like all of the youth in that council. So like
Oh,
from
that's really cool.
yeah, so
Good
it's
for
like
you.
thank you, thank you. I mean, I was acclaimed. You're supposed to like be elected, but no one else under the age of 26 put their name in, so I got it by default.
That's,
Um,
hey man, you are well
I
on your
got it. Yeah,
way to a
right.
successful career of politics.
Exactly right. But yeah, so basically, like what we do is there's been like some politicking back and forth about what this position is actually meant to do, but now like it's in my opinion been going in a very good direction. I did it last year as well. So everywhere from Mississauga out to I think Burlington and then up to like kind of Halton or like Kitchener, Waterloo
Mm.
are within this council. And so basically like when there's like the AGM and other things like that, I represent the voice of everybody just like approving those changes and things like that. And the real interesting part of the position is to really like introduce my goal, because I won't be able to do it as a youth next year because I'll be 26. So I'm no longer at all a youth in the eyes of scouting. And so my goal is to like try to get other youth in the area involved, so there isn't just that one person who got like a whisper in their ear to put in. It'll be a lot more of like people actually being aware of this opportunity and then trying to make the most of it.
So is it I'm just trying to understand what level of government, if it is that first of all, is it an actual official um body? Because I'm trying to I'm trying like this is ultimately is it a municipal body?
No, like it's just within scouting. So like,
Oh, I
so
misunder okay, sorry. I misunderstood that to be something of a Okay, I thought it was, and then
yeah.
well, full credit to the scouts then, because the way you described it, it sounded as if it was a full-fledged regional some sort of full-fledged regional municipal
Well,
representative body.
there is. So, like within the organization, because it's all across Canada, and
Right.
then you can even extend to like continental regions and like the world organization as well. So, like it graduates up,
Mm-hmm.
um, and then so you have like your group. So let's say like my group in Mississauga. And that just consists of like the age groups from I think 5 to 18, and then 18 to 26 is the last one. So that's the one I'm in. And then you're like just adults. So there's those at a local level, and then that expands out to this council that I'm like actively involved in. And then so the group has like kind of like a committee. They call it a committee. Um, and so you just like basically the leaders of the age groups get together, kind of like if you think of it like an elementary school. They like all the teachers getting together, all the
Mm-hmm.
leaders getting together. Like you teach grade 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But ultimately, you're all going to be teaching the same people. So it's like really just coordinating efforts to make sure that the whole group is in alignment to what they're giving each kid as they progress through the age groups.
That's cool. That's a good that's a handy parallel for someone who doesn't know. I was a Cub Scout. It's Beaver
Right.
then Cub, correct?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. So
Um,
So
yeah.
then, like from your group, the groups can then draw on each other through the rest of the council. So all of the groups in the council, and then there's I think 20, there's like 20 something councils across the whole country, 26 maybe,
Mm.
and then the councils then feed into national, and then they don't do like provincial or anything, um, but yeah, so there is a pretty regimented system of like how, let's say if there's like a complaint, how they travel through each level, not at the group level, but once you get to councils, there's employees of Scouts Canada, like they're actually paid to do that work.
Mm-hmm.
People who run the properties, people who, there's all kinds of stuff. Like there's the national office, there's the stores, there's the national office, there's like it's actually a pretty, like there's a lot of infrastructure involved.
That's terrific. Do
Cool.
you so just to take it down a more philosophical road,
Hmm.
because we've chatted about this before, you and we chatted about it way back when we met a few years ago, but also back in the spring when we chatted. Um, eh, I just, and I can't remember what you said, so I'd like to ask it again, but I know we talked about it. What what role do you see? Two things. What role has it played in your life, Scouts? Um, but also I'd like to divide that into what role has it played, you think, for most people generally up until now, and then moving forward, what do you think the future of Scouts looks like? Because we've gotten to that point, and I'm sure we'll get to this, if not tonight, at some point, where we've gotten to a point in our community, in our society, where for some reason it's a crime to just be a boy, and then even a man, and I'm not entirely sure why that is, and I'm a little, I raise an eyebrow at a lot of the responses that I hear, because I just find them to be motivated more by a dishon I find those sorts of messages to be promulgated by dishonest actors. And it's funny how, again, not to meander too far, but it's funny how, despite not having all the information, like me right now asking about Scouts, despite not having all of the information, and no one person can, it's amazing how we as people, and we can get back to this, it's amazing how we as people are able to sense when something just doesn't sound right. You can be totally ignorant on a matter and still go, that just doesn't sit right. Like, that just doesn't sound like it's even remotely in the realm of possibility for any number of reasons. So this nonsense about men are evil, men are this, and it's like, okay, you can cite statistics to me, but I could also just come back to you with 100,000 other countervailing bits of evidence. And I realize that Scouts Canada is for boys and girls, which is terrific. Obviously, I think that's a wonderful thing, and I think that every person, regardless of who they are, should have a tangible connection to both community involvement and an appreciation and interaction with the natural world. So, because I am totally ignorant on the subject, am I correct in guessing that there's been some sort of spillover of these harmful sort of messages? And has that always been the case? Where do you see that going? And maybe I'm completely wrong. I hope I am, but let me know what you think. I'm kind of curious. I wanted to ask you about that.
All right, there's a lot of things. So,
Yeah, I'm sorry. Well, it's called the loquacious. It's the loquacious law, lad. It's not the.
yeah, you ask more questions than you give answers. That's
Isn't
um,
that is well? That's I'm interviewing you. I should be asking the questions.
yeah, exactly. Okay, so the first bit, what has it kind of been for me? Hmm, a lot of things. Like at the beginning, like when I was a kid, it was really just like a friend group, like just like a, I don't know, like any recreation, like you go and you hang out, you play games, you do activities, whatever. And then as you get older, like those activities, you build on those. Like it's a pretty solid skill set that like improves, because you like as a beaver you're doing crafts, as a cub you're doing a little bit of camping, and the creativity that comes from the crafts, you know, you learn to start figuring out how tools work in terms like in a philosophical sense, not just like, you know, what does a hammer do or whatever. It's like, oh, okay, I need to drive this tent peg. How did I, you know, and you create that system of thinking about how can I get this tent peg in the ground. Similar to when I was a beaver and I had to get glue on this piece of felt. How did I do it? Oh, I got a stick, and I like whatever. So then, you know, a tent peg isn't far removed from, oh, I'll get a rock and then I'll tap it down. So like all of that stuff as that builds was always something that has come up a number of times for me. But as I got older, my scouting activities really take hold for me in like approximately high school. Like right before like junior high and high school is when I like really remember it well as being something that was like really making a difference. Because that coincides really well with the time that my parents split up. And I found for me that was a great way, because like when my parents split up, by my own choice, I lost, I like kind of broke contact with my dad. So I never, at that point in time, my aunt's husband, like my uncle, hadn't like come into our lives yet. So I didn't really have like a male influence or like a male role model to follow. So that's kind of what it became for me. And then it was also in a way of having like, I guess you could think of it as like siblings that were like approximately my age, that we were like going and doing things together as like a form of family with like with then male role models. So it was very much like going like with your brothers. I don't have any brothers, but that's how I kind of equate it developmentally. Thinking it like from a psychological perspective. So for me, that was like really important in just kind of like understanding, like, I don't know, like just male things really in general. And I was very fortunate to have a group that was very willing to discuss anything that we like, any questions or ideas that we would have had. Whether it, I don't know, something as like simple as like shaving or cooking meals, like just to feed yourself. And when you're camping, you know, you really learn that skill a different way than you would just kind of doing it at home. So like things like that were really big. And I think that ties in well to kind of what you were getting at, like in the later part of your question about masculinity in general. I don't think I've really noticed any particular spillover where there's any kind of, I don't know, it's probably an extreme word, but any kind of demonizing on that front. I mean, scouting in general, at least in Canada, in the States, it's a little bit of a different ball game. They've literally only just made it fully co-ed, I think. I think now it is, but it's
Yeah,
like,
I think I heard that just maybe a few years ago,
yeah,
not very long.
yeah, and like even then they had to be like, there was like much more, like even now, like you can't have the boys sleeping with the girls like in the same enclosure or like the same shelter, but like they like couldn't go to things at the same time, like the same events and things like that. Like there was a lot of really weird kind of, I don't know, I guess segregation is the word. And so scouting, at least in Canada, for me, on my experience, it's very equal. Like there isn't, like, even if you have like girls in the group, the activities that you're doing and the way that you do it, I found has actually shaped my opinion on, or shaped my perspective of equality, and the fact that we're really all just people, like in considering the genders, which you could then apply to any different like two different groups.
Well, let me just interject and I promise I'll be as brief as possible. That's just a useful observation in general, and it's something that we need to consider, I think, when we're dealing with these conversations about, you know, group A versus group B versus group C, is to really, and maybe, you know, and what I'm about to say will be criticized as, well, you've never had to consider it. But nevertheless, it's like, how often does the average person uh, oh, I lost my train of thought, but the idea you would that you would go about your life thinking about your identity any further than maybe the clothes you're wearing and the things you want to do that day. I'm not completely oblivious to the fact that people encounter situations where all of a sudden
Yeah.
they have a reflection of their outward identity thrust back into their faces, and sometimes in a violent, dangerous, frightening way. Obviously not. But it's weird that we would centralize that discussion beyond what I just said a moment ago. Maybe you have to fix certain things. Maybe I'm wrong in that regard, but I too had a wonderful experience on the trip to Greece, which preceded the trip to Oxford we did. And
Right.
it's as simple as this. When I went, very few people went. It was the first time U of T had done it, and they didn't know how many people would sign up. And ultimately, I think it was 12. There were 11 girls and me. And
Right.
over the course of the 6 weeks, because it was longer than England, but over the course of the 6 weeks, and very quickly into it, it was like you guys are friends. You're like sisters because I don't have any sisters. Um, so yeah, I don't understand the pitting of the sexes against one another. Like it just drives me crazy. Anyway, I'm sorry to derail you, but
No, no, I that's totally fair, but it's the same, I think, to the same end, but a different experience. Like for me, it was, you think
I
of
am
like,
listening to you, Eric. I'm just sending a quick text to ask my mother and brother to tone it down a little bit with the music.
oh, I don't hear
Okay.
anything, so
Oh, you can't? Well, then okay, good. Then we're fine. So then
yeah.
my own comment was more distracting than the music that I can kind of hear.
Come on,
Sorry,
Alex.
dude. Go ahead.
um,
Hey, you
uh,
need to listen. Hey, you're a wonderful guest, but you need to pick up the energy. I've been waiting on that air. I know you woke up. You should have all the energy in the world, dude. You woke up 18 minutes ago. Um,
you've got me thinking. It's too inward right now.
no, but you need to think like an idiot, which is what I do, which is you let your energy precede what it is you want to say. So then what comes out is foolish, but has a lot of vibrant energy.
I just don't want to say the wrong thing and then get like removed. You know what I mean? That's the
I'm the remove. I'm the host. Who's gonna remove you?
no, no, no. Like as we're talking
Oh
about
no, I'm teasing, man. I'm
organization stuff.
teasing.
Yeah.
No, 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 I'm
Uh,
teasing. But same thing with Kote. You'll notice I mean, the guy works at a bank, but I didn't go, hey, this is, he's in office 108 in the West Wing of anyway, but I
yeah.
mean, just,
Well, I was just gonna say, like, my wrapping point was that, like,
mm,
for me, you might think of, I don't know, like setting up a shelter, chopping wood, um, I don't know, chopping wood, whittling things, burning things. You might think of those as traditionally male, but I know plenty of women that do the same thing and with like the same interest we're really all
absolutely.
people just kind of entertained by the same stuff. There isn't an inherent difference in just the ability to get through the day. I think it's or even I don't know, men doing traditionally female things like I don't know, baking or something like. I know just as many guys that through scouting have been introduced to baking because they were like, oh, I can make bread in the middle of a forest with like the most basic tools and ingredients. And it, kind of really just highlights the fact that it doesn't really matter if it's something that, that is a human activity. It doesn't necessarily have to be gendered. And so it was just interesting to like see being exposed to women or just females in something that could be considered stereotypically male, at least from a gender perspective, a
Right.
North American gender perspective, to me was really eye opening. That it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. Okay, yeah, sure. I'm sure most girls aren't into going camping the same way that I grew up going, but there isn't an inherent difference in their ability to do that. So,
Hmm. Well, you make an excellent point. There's a difference between interest and ability.
mhm,
And the beautiful thing about camping, and I actually just went, I think had I gone by the time I spoke with Alex? I don't think so. Anyway, I'd actually last weekend, today's Friday, Saturday, so a week ago, I was camping with my
right.
girlfriend.
I think
And
I watched something you posted and you mentioned just going camping, so I'm not sure.
yeah, maybe. Oh yeah, it was Tuesday, so I guess I'd already been back. Anyway,
Yeah.
but yeah, the beautiful thing I think that do out. camping especially, the beautiful thing about it is it strips everything away from nearly everything artificial. If you don't bring a phone or anything electronic,
Mm-hmm.
and you really pare it down to the very, very essence of the thing, you've got Homo sapiens out in the forest who need to sleep somewhere that's safe from the
Yeah.
elements, who need to figure out what to eat, who also then want to enjoy the environment. Like, these are human universals. And to
Yeah.
me, it's just fascinating how that's kind of what my point was when I asked about scouts and this whole gendered thing at the very beginning. Was I regard it to be an insertion on the part of others rather than it being an organic thing that keeps getting brought up. It's when people say, oh, when people label a thing, the irony is that people are guilty of the very thing that they're criticizing people for doing. They go, oh, well, you're stereotyping. It's like, but isn't that what you're doing when you go and you hunt down an activity and go, that's male, that's female, that's this, that's that?
Yeah.
To me, it's just perplexing. But anyway, it's an incredible experience, and I can tell you from my own part that I've been camping many times, but it's been years. The previous time before Tuesday or whatever it was it had been years, and it was my girlfriend who was far more versed in setting up the tent and cooking. I can't cook at all. I've had the benefit of just living at home with
Yeah.
parents who could do that and spend the time doing so.
Well, it's
So
funny like, because like if you think of like traditional, like I learned to cook with my ex-parent, um, or example parent, not ex-parent. With X or Y parent, I guess you could say,
mm,
um, XX or XY parent, whatever. In our kitchen,
now you're confusing me.
um, like one of my parents or my grandparent or whatever, in the kitchen, and generally that's like a typical set of cooking skills. Whereas most of my cooking ability was gained with like minimal materials. So like I'm huge on using like as few dishes as possible, or I don't worry about sterilizing each piece in between or whatever. Like I don't cross contaminate. I'm conscious of that. But like a lot of people are like, oh, I cut this and I can't cut this, or this touched the counter, so I can't eat that now, or things like that. Whereas like I learned like, oh, that fell in the dirt, but that's the only steak I have with me, so I'm just gonna brush it off and call it a day. Like
I'm
it's
sure I'm sure your stomach acid will take care of
yeah,
the
right. Like
specks of dirt.
so there, and I find the thing I find really cool about camping is in your example, it's um, the skills really just come from interest. And like, okay, sure, yeah, maybe if you're like trying to fell a tree, a guy is a better person for the job because compared to the same size female, you're probably stronger in the right places to allow you to do that a little bit better. But at the end of the day, either one of you could have done it, and it doesn't really really matter.
Yeah,
I know plenty of female scouters who know more about how to use a rope than I do,
for
and
sure.
they know how to identify the plants to eat and stuff like that, and or I don't know how to fix a canoe, things like that. It's really just an experience based thing, and it whatever you do, it just highlights, again, as I said, it just highlights the fact that there isn't that much difference. It's just kind of what you've learned to do.
Well, I've in the chats we've had, especially in the last 6 months, let's say, and that has nothing to do with COVID. That just actually has to do with your living situation, moving from one house to the other.
Yeah.
Um, you give me the impression, at least, of someone who's definitively the you're the one who seem I mean, I'm biased in this because I only see you and I don't see how your mom is handling stuff at the house. But I think that just knowing you the way I do for the last few years, and especially in the last 6 months, I can kind of sense from what you've told me in texts and messages or whatever, how you're very much, despite your 1 a.m. 1 p.m. Wake up today, you take a lot of initiative, and you're far more um trying to think of the word, but you're able to a far greater degree than I to handle things in a list. Like, here's what needs to be done here. Here's the next thing that needs to be done. And I wonder if, going back to the house and this new space that you're in, do you think that, a la camping and being in the outdoors, Is it something about the natural environment that calls on you to be a bit of a taskmaster? That actually has a negative connotation, but you know what
Um,
I'm trying to
yeah,
say.
yeah, yeah.
Like well, just 1 second. I was just gonna ask, like, describe if you could, because I've only seen pictures, like the house and the actual living environment you're in. Because if it's perhaps sparsely decorated and it's a functional place to live, which is good, maybe that informs the psyche. If you have plush couches and ottomans and drapery and you're living like a French king from the 18th century, maybe despite whatever temperament you have and how conscientious and driven you are, you might be tempted to be a little more luxurious and slothful. So do you think you have a kind of a rigorous mind that way? Or, like, I'm
I
just
think it's
weird question, but
I think I'm actually, I don't think I could really say yes or no. I think it depends on the very specific thing we're talking about. So for me, like,
but even that, Eric, you've just but that even that distinction you just made kind of bespeaks bespeaks your ability to compartmentalize and and
perhaps, perhaps, like, okay, so like, here, let me dive into detail a little bit about what I mean, and then we can opine. But so like, I'm known, like, when I go camping, like, like you said, like, yeah, the list thing, that, like, the way you described it is actually something I've been making a conscious effort to do in the last little while. Like, my work to-do list, every day I write it out, and I scratch through things as I go, and that's become, I think, as I've got older and more responsibility has kind of come about with things I've had to do, especially in the last year and a bit. So, like, my mom, like, when I was growing up, I lived with my mom, and she took care of basically all the stuff in the house, and my responsibility was the stuff outside. And I always liked that because I like being outside. I liked the excuse to be doing something physical. I've always loved mowing the lawn. I mean, certain tasks I hate, like raking leaves, stuff like that. But just the being outside and, like, doing things outside, I always did like quite a bit, to some extent. I think that probably just comes from, being at camp, being in somewhere peaceful, being disconnected from the world, and not having to stress about the things until I got home from camp, that kind of stuff. Um, so I think there's definitely something there to be said about that, in terms of, like, yeah, compartmentalizing is a great way to say it too. Like, when I mentioned earlier that I've been doing a lot of work, like today I did a lot of work with, like, sorting through clothes and stuff.
Mhm.
A lot of my struggle with, just being in a materialist society, but with clothing specifically, is that because I do so many different activities, I snowboard, I camp, um, I don't know, I go on hikes, I go on canoe trips. I have so many different gear sets, or I'm big into men's fashion a little bit. So I have so many different gear sets and clothing sets. And I mean, to me, the epitome of the equipment you need to get an activity done right is the clothing that you use. And so, like, I've been very selective as I've accrued activities to make sure that I have the right gear for those activities. So, like, for example, I was talking to my mom about it. Let's say I have, I don't know, a gray hoodie. So I have a gray hoodie that I like to wear out when I'm trying to look good, whether it be to, I don't know, like, go out for a night, or, just, like, I don't know, like a sweater, a warm over sweatery thing, to look good when I, let's say, go to the bar, but I want to be warm. Okay, so I'm trying to be fashionable, but then, maybe especially now at this house, I have a lot of work to do outside, so I'm going to need another sweater, that I can have outside, and get dirty and whatever. But then I might also have another sweater to wear in the house, because whatever this, I don't want to wear the sweater that I might wear out when I go out. I don't want to wrinkle that up and, wear that out too much. I also don't want to wear my dirty sweater from outside. So now I'm wearing a sweater in the house. But
Mhm.
then I also have, a similar sweater that I'm going to wear camping, because it's going to smell like campfire. It's going to get pine sap on it. So already just based on the activities that I do, I have 5 sweaters plus something that I'm going to wear snowboarding, because you need thin layers rather than heavy layers because you need to be mobile, and you don't want to be sweating too much and things like that. And then sweaters for different seasons, and so like it's a big problem for me to like have the right gear for the job. And so there's things like that I think that I compartmentalize, like my office. I mean, it's currently in need of renovation. I want to change the wall color and a couple of things, but in this room, things are pretty plush. I have a massive desk. I've got a bookshelf here full of books. I've got a wing-back chair. I've got my office chair. I've got a nice rug. Bedroom, similar thing. I have a down duvet, a wool blanket to go on top of that, a nice queen-sized bed. But in the room, the living room generally is nice, less, and I think my mom thinks the same way too. Like, the room that you spend all your time sitting in, you're not going to spend a lot of money on a couch because you're going to wear it out. You want it, decently nice so that it still looks good and, keeps up with the Joneses or whatever. But, if you're going to be, and that's the couch that the dog cuddles up on and all that, you don't want to have your nice leather couch. And so, like my family also has been a little bit old school, and you have the room that you use regularly, and then you have the room that you bring company into, like the company room.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's the couch that we don't sit on unless we have guests over and things like that. And as much as that's been the brunt of many jokes, I think as you've asked your questions, like I'm kind of realizing like, yeah, I think this way about a lot of stuff. And I have a lot of things, just thinking about it, I have a lot of things that are like, I have like the version I use all the time, and then I have the version of it that I use when I want to be fancy. Like we have like a regular set of mugs like this one, that is just a big mug, and we have a couple of them, use them interchangeably, don't care. But if I want to be nice and kind of feel a little luxurious, I'll use a mug that's a little more personal, stuff like that. So it's funny that you say that, because I'm realizing that there are certain things where I'm very practical, that I don't care about too much about the status of it, but then there's a lot of things where I do care about the status of it.
Well, I'll just tell you from an outsider's perspective that, and you'll disagree with this, and you'll think that I'm just trying to flatter you, but I'm not. Let me walk you through my understanding of you, because we met in England, and we actually met in Toronto, and for the viewers, we met in Toronto at Woodsworth, and I was late for that briefing on Oxford and what it would be like. But I came in, you were already there, but I think he hadn't started talking about what was going on. We were all just sitting around, and you were chatting with some people, and everyone, I don't know, most people are quiet. I've always been surprised, one of the louder, more outgoing ones. It could be a room, and I think you and I are the same this way, where it can be a room full of strangers, but you're extroverted enough to, it's a combination of extroversion, but also interest in human beings. Like the interest in, it's like, well, who are you? Like, let me get past whatever it is you're displaying. And that can be pretty off-putting for most people, but obviously I think we were simpatico in that regard. So there you were, and I don't remember what you were saying, but you were cracking jokes, and I was in a foul mood because I was late and I didn't want to be, and I was like, who's this guy? And da 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 da. I basically, in my head, conjured up whatever criticisms people could also throw back at me, which was, look at this guy being all yappy and blah, blah, blah. Of course, we're exactly the same in that regard as well. But anyway, so what I'm trying to get at is that from that moment on, and then basically for the rest of that month, which is a pretty formative time. I'm always doing this. I'm always throwing out a word, and I'm like, does that formative?
Yeah.
Thank you. I got a dictionary over there, but in that formative time, there we were, and it was, I would guess that almost everybody had an extremely positive experience, and it was novel and it was exciting. So it was interesting to see how everybody, you included, moved from the Oxford August energy level to September, and now we're got the hangover of the trip into the a bona fide uh, autumn semester, and then onward and onward. So through, and watching people's stories and, what's Eric up to? Because frankly, and I kind of hinted at this, I think, with Alex, if I hadn't been on this trip, likewise, if you hadn't been on this trip or that trip, we wouldn't be chatting right now because we wouldn't have met because we
Yeah.
we were doing different programs and that was that. So an important time. And I would track how people were doing and I would see, what's up, how's Eric doing, what's everyone up to. And I would watch how people reverted back to their non-vacation side of
Yeah.
things. And what I
Yeah.
note, and I would notice in you, and this is completely anecdotal and built on, half-baked thoughts and well, there are also memories that are past their half-life. But
True. Yeah.
well, I thought that you have far more than I do. A again, this ability to compartmentalize, and I've encountered you. We've gone out for drinks since then, and we've chatted 100 times, and I don't know which Eric I'm going to get. And I mean that, I swear to God, I mean that in the best way because I think that you do what I aspire to do, which is to not let, and again, this is what I said a moment ago, maybe you'll disagree, but to not let some sort of superordinate attitude for a day, a week, however long, to determine the daily bread kind of decisions that need to be made. Like I become, and we are very similar, but I become absolutely crippled. And for me, if I'm in a foul mood, it's impossible for me to be pragmatic. I think you're a very pragmatic person. And
Thank you.
it, well, I mean that. And it's something that I wish I had because I too keep lists, but then I start to go on some fanciful adventure in my head and I'm chasing butterflies. I mean, I'm not a foolish person. I work hard when the time is right, but to do what you do, which is to put things in their place in a very healthy way, at least from an outsider's perspective, is something that I wish I could do because it's vital, especially if you have a creative or imaginative mind, the way you and I both do. I mean, we are chatting for hours about things, some of it mundane, some of it not, and an ability to find the sophisticated within the mundane.
Mhm.
But if you have a mind like that where you cannot stop the flow of words, I'm just saying it's very impressive that you're able, from what I can tell, to still have a curious mind, but know that okay, the lawn needs to get mowed and I need to make this drive and Nana needs this, so I got to do that. I'm the king of procrastinating in that regard, and I don't know if I'll ever be able to shake it. So I'm just, well,
I
cheers to your
will
work ethic.
if I can. Thank you. I just have water right now, but it's
Of
just
course
like
you do.
your stuff. It's your stuff, unflavored.
Yeah, you know what? They did a good job with this. It
I'm
it
not gonna lie. The
actually,
only reason I'm not drinking is because I drank everything that I have to drink. So,
no,
um,
that's how it goes. But
yeah. um,
yeah, I
yeah.
didn't want to be too
I was just gonna
saccharine
say
about
that
all that.
what
But
what you were saying about compartmentalizing. It's definitely. I think if you took me a little bit like a little while ago, I would be a lot. I think it's really just been a buildup of discipline that I'm still very much working on. In terms of being able to shut down one thing and be able to focus on this thing. Procrastination has always been a problem for me. Like I get the most done at the end of the workday. The end of the workday is like the best time for me. The last 10 hours before a paper is due, that's the best time for me to get work done.
ugh.
But like it's stressful every time. Like the last couple hours of the day, I'm like, oh my God, I have so much I need to do. Um, and I find it's I don't know. I think it's something that I don't really know how to like control yet. But it's really been like something that I've had to work on and like develop as like an ability and in a skill set and a perspective. Just with like a lot of things that have like happened in my life that I've had to like really compartmentalize and understand that there's a time for this, but I also have this, and this to do. Um, and yeah, I do consider myself a bit of a dreamer where I have like an idea, but I don't have a way to actually get it done. And starting to act on things like I was saying to you the other day. I've wanted to do something like what you have going here for a very, very long time. But it's just one of those things that like I've procrastinated on. I just haven't pulled the trigger on it. And
Well,
so,
I was just gonna say I only benefited from the sort of mental disconnect between actually being in law school, um, and being home all the time. So with the exception of one class on Thursdays, and even that might change with this upward swing in the case numbers. With the exception of that one class, everything is at home, so I get to delude myself into thinking that, oh, I can balance everything because I don't need to drive and commute and blah blah
yeah,
blah.
yeah. Oh man, I feel that it's
So
so
on
brutal.
if well, I know you're a driver too. Like I drive all the time, and if I
Yeah,
was still required to drive to school, there'd be no podcast. There just wouldn't be. I
yeah,
because you know more, you know exactly how it is to have to deal with a commute. It's exhausting. I bet you the vast majority of people's the things that ail them, I think, are attributable to news media primarily. Actually, no. Number two is news media and the constant venom and just negative nonsense being poured into our heads through our phones and TVs and laptops. And then number one though is commuting because you have everybody is a thinker. It's not just me and you who are imaginative. People sit and they think, and if you give them enough time, and the longer the commute is, the more they'll think, and then the more they'll reflect on the value and the meaningfulness of what it is they're doing. And
hmm
then if even a small little thing is out of joint, then the whole thing can come crumbling down, which means that it was a rotten structure to begin with. But yeah, I mean, if I was commuting, there'd be no time for this because the commute there, you have to drive and be careful because you need to be a careful driver.
yeah,
And then you're exhausted and frustrated. Even if you're a patient driver, it's exhausting. Then you have your school and then or work, whatever it may be. You're dead by the time you come home. There's no energy to do anything. So, in
yeah.
some kind of perverse sense, I'm getting more done by being home. I mean, I guess that's not that confusing, but
Well, I'm finding for me actually having a lot to do at home, just with moving and having 7 acres to take care of. Like it's actually been very motivating. In general, again, it's still a work in progress mentally, but it's been really motivating to like at the end of a work day have like more like work to do of a different kind. Like when I was at home, or when I was living in Mississauga, like through high school, through university, like by the time I was done a day of studying, or I was done a day at school, or I was done a day at work. Like I didn't want to come home and mow the lawn. As much as I enjoy it, it was still like a chore that was like a super aggravating thing to
yeah.
have to do. But like now, I'll finish work at 5 o'clock after starting at 8:30 some days, and then be like, all right, cool. I'll get outside. I'll mow the lawn until it's dark out, and then I'll do like I don't know. I'll get together with like a couple friends and play Xbox, or I'll read, or I'll do I don't know, do a little bit of like creative or like recreational work on the computer, like something that I just want to learn about or whatever. Um, and but just having like I don't know. It's just different. And I don't know if that's maybe because I'm not commuting. I don't know if it's just because I'm in a different environment now that's a little more stimulating with like different jobs to do.
Mm.
I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just the beauty of the place that I'm in. I want to go out and enjoy like the lawn, and one of the ways of doing that is seeing every corner of it on the lawnmower. I don't know what it is, but something about this change for me has been very beneficial just for my own peace of mind and my own ability to stay focused on the things that I actually need to get done.
Well, you seem to be living, even just comparatively speaking, you seem to be living a far more agrarian life. Um, there's more green in your world, which is obviously something you're familiar with as a scout leader, and it's
Yeah,
something that's just necessary, I think, for a person's health. And it's funny because what happens is I've got Walt Whitman on the mind because my mom bought a beautiful book for. I think it's behind me actually somewhere. Yeah, Walt Whitman Speaks. It's a collection of stories that a close friend of his compiled shortly after Whitman's death. So it's a
right.
combination of poetry as well as interviews. Kind of like Bullfinch's mythology in the sense that it's the bulk of it is the actual story itself. In this case, the actual poems, but then it's punctuated with anecdotal bits to really bring this mysterious poet to life. And the common trend I've noticed in a lot of Victorian novels, which was a huge focus in my English degree, Victorian novels, this with Whitman, and even your own anecdotal experience, and I'm kind of sensing it from what you're saying, is that as a person, male or female, as a person begins to engage with the natural world around them, and particularly if that natural world is something that is under their own tutelage, like it's you who's mowing the lawn, it's no one else will do it except for you. It's kind of a slipping back into a very ancient mode of being that many of us, especially urbanites, are unfamiliar with. And it's so restorative to the soul because it's so much more natural to how we ought to be. And the funny side effect of that is, and I've experienced this again, I have to turn to Greece, but also on those brief camping trips I've had, the more that at least me personally, the more that I have engaged with the more that I have prioritized, either consciously or subconsciously, my physical environment, because a vista is just so beautiful that it overcomes me. Those transcendent moments of experiencing the world around us, the further back in our cares and in our thinking are our fellow human beings. And so, but not in a negative way. What happens is because everything's being distilled to such a basic fundamental level, people too, if you're a rural person, if you live in the country, you have a completely different view of human beings than people who live in the city. So
Mm-hmm.
there's almost like a terseness that comes with someone who's so focused on the outside world, but it's not a coldness. It's a very functional, and I'll use the word pragmatic again, way of dealing with people and and the environment. And you recognize you're not looking at, Alexander or Eric or whomever. You're looking at Homo sapien, on my land. And
Mm.
it sounds goofy, and you know what I mean? But like, I maybe that's kind of what you're experiencing in some sense. I won't put words into your mouth though.
Well, here, so let me tell you two things just about all of that and like the benefits of that sort of reversal backwards.
Well, you seem
So
you seem much calmer than even in May and June, and I know that that was a chaotic time, but you seem far more tranquil and at ease than you did even 5, 6 months ago.
well, that's good, I guess. Yeah.
Maybe you're
Um,
exhausted, but you don't seem. You actually
yeah, I
seem.
don't know.
You
Yeah,
seem relaxed. I don't know.
I mean, I've especially now, especially like since I've got here, I've been doing a lot of reading of like philosophical poetry and philosophy, and like I've been reading Aurelius in the last little while.
I he I would take him to battle. Like, it is the one. I'm in that book, and I are inseparable. I brought it to England.
Yeah, yeah, it's so good, and like even do I have it around me?
I'm
It's
really glad you enjoyed it, and
uh,
thank you for the
well,
bullfinch. I have to get
I
to it.
haven't finished that yet. I'm still I pick it up every once in a while and I read some more, but um, yeah, you're welcome. I've been really enjoying that as well. So I've been doing a lot of that, and I think a lot of that has like really pushed me forward in terms of I don't know, just my mood and in the way that I think about stress and things like that, and making me a lot more self-aware of things. Again, still a work in progress. Like, it's completely different, for in a day-to-day scenario when I actually have stressful things to deal with. But yeah, so it's been the last little while has been very formative, I think. But just on going back to things like that. So I was talking to my neighbor the other day. There's just like it's so funny for me to talk about this stuff because like to a Mississaugan ear, this is the weird like such a weird sentence. But so my neighbor is
Is that
storing.
your own Mississaugan ear, or
Yeah,
to
like to
any?
my own ear, or I'm sure to somebody else from Mississauga, this would just be a weird sentence. But like,
Okay.
I was standing in my barn yesterday talking to my neighbor who is storing, I think it's like 105-foot bales of straw in our barn. So I think a
Oh,
divided.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a shared barn?
No, it's my barn, but it's beside like his field, and he asked if he could store his straw in it, and it's space I'm not using. So I was like, yeah, sure. So there's like 50,000 pounds of straw in my barn, but we're
Oh
standing
my
there.
God.
Yeah, dude, it's a lot. I'll show you a picture later. It like it's so funny because like this is a perfect example. Not even what I was gonna say, but like to me, that it looks so weird. I've driven through the country. I've seen these things on the side of the road in people's fields and whatever.
Sure.
I've never stood in front of it in my own property and been able to like climb on top of 50,000 pounds of straw. Like I've never had to have somebody tell me, don't let your dog in here alone, because sometimes dogs will chase small animals into it and get stuck because they'll like climb up and fall down. Like it's crazy. And to my neighbor,
Wow.
this is the most normal thing ever. Or like we were talking about light pollution, because we were just talking about lighting and stuff, and how I want to add some lights on timers so that if my mom comes home late or whatever, she can like navigate to the house. But I also don't want to like screw up light pollution for everybody else. So trying to find that balance. But we were talking about the stars and how like a very close friend of mine, his little brother came to my cottage as a kid. Um, and it was the first time that kid had ever like stood out like on a dock on a lake in the middle of like cottage country and saw that level of stars, right?
Mm.
From living in Mississauga to seeing that. And he was mind blown. He was like 5 years old. He thought we like turned the stars on. He didn't understand what he was seeing. And we had to be like, no, that's what they look like all the time. And my neighbor said like, yo, I've read about kids who grow up like that. And it was so funny to like hear this difference in lifestyle, even though it's the same province, we're really not that far away, but it's completely different. And I don't know if I told you about it, but like you've probably seen the picture, that there are a couple of pictures that I took or that people took. I went on a canoe trip to Algonquin Park a couple of weeks ago, and one of my friends and I were talking afterwards about like transitioning back into just like daily work, and how when you're on a canoe trip, like there is so much you need to do every day. Like, if you want to drink water, you have to pump it, you have to filter it. If you want to cook, for us, we don't use gas stoves, because you just have to carry more. So first of all, you've had to carry all your stuff to where you're going, or continue to do that every day if that's how you've planned your trip. Your only vehicle is like a canoe. If you need to go to the hospital, you have to wait at least 6 hours until you're actually at the car, and then you're at your cell phone, and then you have to get in the car and then drive to where there's cell service. So there's kind of that in the back of your mind. um, and so there's all these things that are so focusing on like the moment. If you want to eat, you have to get the food out, you have to chop enough wood to power the little special stove we have. If you want warmth at night, you have to make sure that there's enough wood chopped up. You have to every couple of days take your sleeping bag out and air it so that like the moisture from your sweat doesn't get you, like if it's going to be a cold night, you want to make sure that it's dry. If it rained a lot the night before, everything is going to be damp, so you want to set it out in the sun. All these things. And if like you have to like still do the dishes, and while this person's cooking, this person's doing the dishes, these people are pumping water, this person's chopping wood, so there's a lot of work to do every day. There's like a daily at least 5 hours of work probably, that needs to be done at some point. And it's completely different. It's way more enjoyable. It doesn't feel like work. Or even like just paddling. Like it's really physically taxing to paddle.
Mm-hmm.
And still you got to think, because you have to be vigilant to make sure, especially if you're in a river, there's no rocks, there's not a snapping turtle when you're trying to like wash your face and wash the sweat off or something. You got to think about like your measurements for food and how much water you're going to need. And am I drinking enough water out in the sun all day? Have I applied sunscreen? And I'm probably making it seem more intense than it is, but at the end of the day, it's still a lot of work. And it's how, and I don't find like, even if like I'm tired at the end of a day like that and I'm ready to go to sleep, it's completely different from finishing a day of like work.
Oh
Whether
yeah.
this job or any of the previous jobs I've had, it's just completely different. It's like it's a form of like working for yourself just to get yourself through the day, which obviously I wouldn't be able to do without money, because I wouldn't be able to afford the gear. I wouldn't be able to afford,
Which is ironic, right? Because
which is ironic. And so that was part of our conversation too, but we don't like to talk about that because it really ruins it. But So like it's a weird thing, but when you're camping truly, I think everybody needs to do it, or and for me, the goal of living in this place now is to introduce more of this into my day to day. Like when I'm in Algonquin, I've always loved it, and I used to do it every year, but it's life gets in the way, and we haven't gone in a while. But it's been so great because when you're there, or like when I'm just camping and you're disconnected like that, it's so nice to know that like whatever happens in the outside world doesn't matter until you finally get to the car and you finally drive into cell service. No matter what happens, whether it's something good or something bad, it doesn't matter until you're out.
Mm-hmm.
All you have at that time is the people that you're with, the friendship that you have, whatever disagreements you get into, whatever, laughs you have, anything like that. That's all that matters.
But isn't that a beautiful thing, Eric, that things can not matter until they need to matter,
Yeah.
which is the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah, it's exactly how stress is supposed to work, right? And
Well,
I'm
in
sure,
fact, I don't think that counts as stress, right? Because stress is
well, like long-term stress is just an over-engagement of short-term stress that doesn't go
mm,
like
I
you're
agree. No, I agree with you, and you know more about psychology than I do, but I would like to use the word strain, like what you described,
or
what you just
anxiety.
no, 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 no.
Anxiety and stress, I think, are a good way to think about it.
Yeah, no, no, no. Sorry, I'm not being clear. When you were on your trips, let's say,
Hmm.
and you have this paradigmatic view of the world, because that's what it is. Every day we live, there's this view of what's valuable and what's not, and we have to make choices. So as you're on these portage trips, if it was a portage, I don't know, but
Yeah,
uh,
that was part of it. Yeah.
yeah, you have an entirely different set of priorities, and those priorities will feed your emotional reactions to things. But because you're manifesting your being in such a physical way, and you get into a beautiful autopilot that we sometimes get into with work, which is unhealthy, ironically, because we're not it's not conducive to automatism the way
Hmm.
cooking and cleaning, and that's why people feel good when they clean their house. It's like, what did you do? It's the same building, so to speak,
Hmm.
but the idea there, of course, is that that's a kind of fatigue, but it's not an exhaustion or an overexertion.
It's like a physical tired versus a mental or emotional
Exactly.
tired. Yeah.
Exactly. And I remember, you're talking about this kid who's 5 years old and he's never seen the stars. Well, my dad had the most dramatic, I have to imagine, and I've gathered from the stories he's shared over the years, but the guy's from New York City. And then he would go every summer uh, as a kid, right into adulthood. He would go to the little village in Greece that my family is from, and I'm sure maybe I've mentioned it before. But this is also the same village that my grandmother grew up in, and so when she's not in Sparta, she then gets on, in a cab, and it's probably only about 20 kilometers away, but the geography of the land is such that, or
Yeah.
rather, the topography is such that it's an hour drive, even though it's
Mm.
20 kilometers. It's bizarre. Anyhow, this is a guy coming from New York City who then finds himself in a mountain village of 100 people. So you're going to see no stars in New York City, and then
Mm.
you're going to see hundreds of thousands up on that
Yeah.
unpolluted village, mountaintop, in the village in.
Well, like it's funny now. Like even a similar thing. Like where I live now, the only lights are like the lights that somebody has like on their driveway or whatever, so that again, if they come home, they like can find their way from their if they have an external garage or so to keep animals away or something. But for the most part, like there's no lights, and so like now I'm actually in a situation where
Is
I'm
your
like,
sleep better?
I've always used blackout drapes, but I think I don't I yes, but I don't know if that's because I'm just physically active.
Mm.
Like instead of going to the gym for 3 hours, which I've or an hour, let's say, every day, which I never did, I'm outside doing physical labor for an hour and a half every day. So that could be it too. um, but like even now I'm at a point like where there's a dramatic paradigm shift, whereas in the city or like New York, you're like, oh wow, full moon, that's so beautiful, whereas now I'm pissed that there's a full moon because like I can't see the stars because
Mm.
the moon is the brightest thing. Like the other day I walked outside and I was like, what's going on? But the way that the moon was, and because like there was There was like moon with no clouds around it, but then like way on the other side of the sky there was clouds. So what was happening was the moonlight was getting trapped on those clouds and like
Oh
backlit
yeah, yeah.
everything, which like you would never see in the city, first of all. But like it was like so weird, and I'm like, wow, this is so strange. I can't see any stars, but it's because the moon is just so intense right now.
Yeah.
It's so weird, and I can only imagine what that would be like to be in Greece, first of all, on a mountainside, looking at stars for the first time. Like that'd be unbelievable.
Yeah, I would imagine, Eric, it's not much different, let's say, than what you're seeing in Algonquin on a clear night. But if you're coming from a city, which, many billions are, what do you know? And we read stories. I've been reading a lot of Lord of the Rings. Um, I've been reading a lot of Lord of the Rings since COVID started. So in March, I picked up the Fellowship. And the funny thing is, let me tell you a fun little, one of those icebreaker funny things about me. Every time I've played a video game where I needed to enter a username or whatever, I always went, because sometimes, not sometimes, almost always, every game that I played had a 12 character like gamer tag maximum number of
Right.
letters.
About,
So
yeah. Pretty
so
standard.
mine was always Mr. J.R.R. Tolkien, which is exactly 12 letters. And
Okay.
I'm a bit of a hypocrite and a liar because until recently, I'd never actually read the books, which I'd read. Well, hold on, because I read them on and off and bits and pieces, right? So
Right.
I've read the books, just not in a linear manner. But with COVID, it was like I've semester's over, and I had a month where I wasn't working, and I was also done school, so I had a month. So I started picking up Lord of the Rings, and it's amazing to me. I wanted to bring this up with you for a number of reasons, and this seems like an appropriate time. It's amazing to me how tiring as a reader it is in my 21st century mindset, in my 21st century urban outlook.
Hmm.
It's actually exhausting for me to read his descriptions of the lay of the land. And of course, if you know anything about the Lord of the Rings, and of course many people do, this is a journey. So the journey, and not only is it's a journey. It's not a stationary event. So every time there's movement, there's a whole new description that's needed so you understand where the hell they are. Add to that fact that it's a fantasy story and it's a fantasy.
So he's got to draw attention to the things that are different.
He needs to, yeah, exactly. So he does an incredible job, obviously, making a very real earthen, doing it again, but he makes the hand to mouth existence, the outdoor experience, and simply he just captures what's so magical about the physical world. And if you aren't primed for that and you're not used to living in that manner, it is impossible to read the Lord of the Rings, because he'll spend a whole page describing just where they're standing vis-a-vis everything around them. And of
Yeah.
course, he has to draw attention to the beauty of the Shire, which is lush and pastoral, and then he has to contrast that with Mordor, which is a barren, desolate wasteland.
Yeah.
And so I have to imagine for a 1950s audience that would have been well, and I'm talking even in England, right?
Yeah.
They would have been far more familiar with natural landscapes. And the English are gardeners anyway, but like
So,
we
oh,
don't have that. I struggle to read it.
have you read Game of Thrones?
I've never read it. No.
Okay, so when you finish Lord of the Rings, at least read the first Game of Thrones, and I think you'll notice a really cool difference. Lord of the Rings spends a lot of time describing the land, and in Game of Thrones, there's a lot of time spent describing the rooms.
Rooms,
Like,
eh?
because most of the story is political. So yeah, there's
Ah, fair
outside,
enough.
but a lot of the description is, he walked into this guy's office and this was what was on his desk, or he was
Hmm.
dip and it was like this. And I thinking back, I could be wrong. Maybe it's just because I've been primed to think this now after a year explanation, but I don't like. I'm certain that if I went back and read Game of Thrones, the uh, description of landscapes would be way less detailed than the description of like social spaces.
That's
And
interesting. That's
because
really interesting.
Game of Thrones is about political story, not a journey through the world on
Hmm.
foot.
Yeah, well, you're journeying through human hearts and not, the land.
Yeah.
That's interesting,
Yeah.
man. I feel I'm one of those people.
Which is cool considering when they were both written.
Yeah, agreed. And what's interesting to me is I never thought I was this sort of person, but I fall squarely into the camp of people that will get bored. So, and I'm an English major and I'm in law school. I should know how to read and I should know how to appreciate reading. But even still, if I'm not patient enough or in a calm enough mood, I will look for those quotation marks and try to see what the hell happens next as conveyed through dialogue. And it's like, no, you're doing it all wrong. If that's how you're reading, you're doing it wrong. And this guy, I mean, I've never remembered it being such a painstaking analysis of the physical environment that these characters are traversing. But then there have been 100,000 scholarly articles about how Tolkien brought the world to life, and in many ways, Middle Earth was its own character, and you have to navigate in and with and around it. And it really is striking. Like I am not in the right frame of mind to read that sort of thing. It's helpful that I know the story like the back of my hand, and the movies were fantastic for that. And the movies actually assist in helping conjure some of the images that he's doing, because Peter Jackson clearly nailed it. So when
Yeah.
he's talking about a cleft in the cliffs, and down below some 15 meters or whatever it is, there's a stream, but is it drinkable water? The sun, like it's as if you dropped the man on a foreign planet that resembles Earth, and he needed to tell the crew back home exactly what he saw. It's astonishing. It really, really is. I've never had this much difficulty reading about you know snow in the mountains and where they are. It's amazing to me. I have
I'm
to reread it.
scanning my shelf. I have this is kind of a bit of a jump, but I have a really cool set of Game of Thrones, or sorry, Lord of the Rings.
I've been meaning to, as you search, I'll just say I've been meaning to buy this one I saw, and it's from a Tolkien devoted sort of fan page or website, which means that it's
So
go for it.
it's originally it was divided into five.
And
Five.
that's just the Lord of the Rings.
Yeah. Oh wait. Yeah. Maybe it's five. Um. Yeah, I think so. What's this one? It's so funny though. Like it was in perfect condition, but then the book I picked up and read is all is all.
I think mine looks like that on the front too.
But
Oh,
look, like yo, literally, it looks like nobody read the others until I got to it and just like messed it all up,
yeah.
which I feel bad about. But yeah, the ring, book one, the ring sets out, and so when it got more popular, they split it into, or they clumped them into three, so that they could make it more digestible and not have to print a million, have all a bunch of different releases and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And
Well, it makes perfect sense. The actual single volume is a massive tome, and as you were going to hunt for those books just there, I was going to say that I found this one leather bound. It's like a crimson red. It's beautiful, and it's a single volume, so it's got to have, I don't know, it's got to be like 1,500 pages, and it's just the Lord of the Rings.
well,
And
I'm actually just wondering now. Yeah, I grabbed my mic by accident. Um, if it was the movies that split it into three, because like here it's book one, the ring sets out. Two, the ring goes south, the treason of Isengard. The ring goes east, the war of the ring, the end of the third age.
mm,
But I wonder if that leather-bound tome that you've mentioned, if it's like Bullfinch's mythology, where it's like multiple books in one.
I couldn't tell you, and I think different publishers and editors have done different things with it, but I think, yeah, no, I think no, because actually, hold on, I do recall in the book itself, Tolkien split it up into book one, two,
Okay.
and three, and then I think people that followed, commentators, those who adapted it into movies and plays, whatever, they went by that rubric and decided, okay, well, this is a convenient place to just stop this because, I mean, Lord of the Rings, the Fellowship of the Ring, that's almost 3 hours, and that's the non-extended. And its ending maps neatly onto where the second one, and I'm talking, the movie's ending actually occurs slightly before the end of Fellowship of the Ring, the book. So, for instance, I'm just saying that there isn't a complete congruence and overlap. Some of it, sorry, there isn't a complete one-to-one. There is some overlap between the books as he divided them, and then how the filmmakers have. Eric, I have to run to the bathroom or I'm going to pee myself.
Dude, I'm so glad you said that because
Do you want it? We can, buddy, we can end it right now because we actually have been going for almost 2 hours if you add up the first portion. And I'm
all right,
happy.
how about this? Unless you have somewhere to be, I'm happy to stay on with you. We change shirts, right? And then we make the second podcast now.
You're a wild man, and I appreciate your energy. And I would have appreciated. I'm just being an ass, but you know what, man? I actually have not even eaten today. I had a
You didn't eat.
bagel. I had a bagel 14 hours ago,
Mm-hmm.
which is not good. So how about this? I need to use the bathroom. I think that we have quite a bit of content here. And this is the funny thing. And I'll be quick because I know you got to go as well. But with Cote, I had questions prepared, but the webcam was garbage and the audio was garbage on my end. In this case, I have the webcam and it looks okay to me. I'm happy with this. And I have the microphone, but I didn't have questions prepared. So we did kind of the opposite. So we meandered a bit more, which is fine. But I actually did have some targeted questions that I had in mind that I've since lost. And I'd like to end it here. And then I'm sure the second I hang up, I'm going to have things occur to me. And let's just reconnect in like a month, man, or sooner, 2 weeks, whatever. Because this is very easy for me to set up. And like I
Yeah,
said, with Zoom, you hit end, it's recorded, you post it, and then there's very little work on my part that's necessary.
sure. Yeah, just let me know.
Yeah.
I mean, you said that you might have availability tomorrow. I can make something maybe work tomorrow, maybe. But
Yeah, I don't see why not. We could even do a part one, part two. Maybe we can do it a little bit shorter. I don't care. That's the
so,
beauty.
okay,
I'm home.
if you come up with your questions, we can do that and go. Because I mean, easily we can continue talking about different books we've read and go for hours.
Yeah.
For a podcast, I feel like you need to have a little more structure.
Well, that's just the thing. We've got the technical side of things, and we lucked out with the second recording because nothing so far is bugged out or whatever. So I think we're in good shape in that regard. Um, but I want to walk away with this. I want to have a little bit of dinner because it's 10:30 now and I've had nothing.
Yeah.
And I want things will come to mind. I'd like to write them down, and then
Yes.
next time we can hit the ground running. But I think this was good, and I'm thrilled that you had the chance to take the time, man. I'm sorry to end on such an unceremonious kind of note, but
Oh,
I
that's
know
fun.
that
No, I'm feeling it too, so don't worry.
I'll
I've been
have
compartmentalizing that sensation for like probably
exactly.
20 minutes and being like, you know, we don't need to worry about it. We're gonna finish this out and then go.
I love it, man. Yeah, no, great minds. Love how that makes me
At
sound
the
like
same
I'm.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, man. Listen, let's reconvene, and I'll tell you what. Actually, this is what I'd like to do next time. I can tell you right now what I'd like to do next time.
Sure.
I recommended Marcus Aurelius's Meditations, and you got a kick out of it, and I'm very happy to hear that. You've recommended to me, and I've got it over there on my shelf. You recommended Bullfinch. Why don't we come up with some ideas just on the and they'll obviously have their offshoots. But I wanted to talk to you about it tonight, but I didn't have a chance to read it in time. Let me come away, like give me a week. Let me sink my teeth into that, and we're just talking next weekend or 10 days from now, which will fly by, as you know. Let me sink my teeth into that, and doubtless I'll have some things come to mind, and I'd love to share them with you and ask you about it. And then if you have something from Aurelius, you let me know and we'll go from there, and that's 3 hours at least.
Sure. With Bullfinch, are you starting at the beginning? Because
Where should I start? You tell me.
I've only been reading Charlemagne.
I will read Charlemagne then.
Okay, because that's what I started. I was thinking about Vikings and King Egbert had like previously to the story visits Charlemagne. So I was like, oh, cool. I want to learn about this guy.
All right, let's do
That's
it
what I
there.
read. So let's do Charlemagne. I'll read this. I'm almost done Meditations or Emperor's Handbook,
Yeah.
and then we also have the Razor's Edge we can talk about.
Dude, don't get me started on that book. I love that book. It's actually such a simple story, right? But I just love it.
I find it funny how Gatsby like it is. It's like
Same, well, same kind of era, right? I mean,
but like again, it's about this weird, whimsical third-party character who's like kind of part of the story, but also not really part of the story.
yeah.
Who's like really interesting for different reasons to an external eye.
I was gonna call it social commentary, but it's not even that. It's like social commentaries at a macro level, obviously. But this is social commentary, so to speak, but at such a micro level. You're talking about six people and you're tracing their lives over 10 years, let's say, and it's incredible. Oh, my girlfriend's calling. Maybe that's my cue. She's gonna get. I was like, oh, I'm on the phone with Eric. It'll be about 45 minutes, 2 hours.
Yeah, you should just call her back as you're peeing.
Perhaps. I
What's that noise?
Must be the signal.
Yeah.
Flush noise. All right, man. Let's. I think we have a good idea for next time, and we'll go from there. And what I'll do is I'll leave this unlisted. I'll give you a chance to take a peek at it if you're satisfied. I mean, are you going to rewatch 2 hours? I don't know, but
I might listen to it in the background. It's always fun giving it like a couple days, or maybe probably not a couple. Maybe I'll listen to it tomorrow while I'm working.
Okay, but I'm gonna put it up tonight, I think, and then if you're cool with it, I'll pull the trigger and we'll just let it go live. I have no intention on editing these. They're too painstaking and it's 2 hours long. So,
Right.
We haven't said anything outrageous. I don't think that we need to edit anything out. I can't think of anything.
I can't think of it.
All right, man.
All right.
All right, brother.
A
Thanks for
pleasure.
taking the time. Let's sort out the next one.
All right, sounds good.
See you, buddy.
See ya.